while we don't have a Speaker of the House, war wages in Israel, and the presence of the United States nearby in waters has a lot of people going, what's going on? Do we have control of this situation? That's why we go to our guest here. Let's speak with Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, retired. He's the former national security advisor of the Trump administration, and we're grateful to have him back on the show. Thank you for being with us again here, sir.
Annie, thank you for having me. Good to be with you.
I appreciate that very much. I want to give you the opportunity to kind of tie these two big news stories together, if you will. The absence of a speakership of a speaker in the House of Representatives might seem like a political thing, but it does seem as though there are acts of business that need to come out of the House of Representatives to support what America's role is, helping defend Israel, providing Israel with the resources that they need. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah, Annie, it is. You know, I go back to, there was a great cartoon character years ago authored by a guy named Kelly. It was Pogo, and Pogo's greatest line was, "We have met the enemy and he is us." You know, they just do it to themselves, and it makes us look stupid to the rest of the world. And I sit there watching it, and I was watching the vote count, and you almost want to tell people, look, some of the people you're putting votes in, you know they're not going to win. So what kind of message are you sending to the rest of the world, that we're in disarray, we can't get anything together, there's no Speaker of the House, and there's a major war going on? You know, we've just put major warships in the eastern part of the Mediterranean. Not only the Eisenhower carrier strike groups coming in, but the Ford is there, and they're moving an amphibious ready group from the Bataan, from the Persian Gulf region there. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. Don't you think we ought to have a unified government? And what I mean by unified is elect a Speaker of the House so they can do some work. Yeah, so I'm with you on that. It's pretty frustrating just sitting and watching it.
We're speaking with retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg here about what is taking place in Israel as we watch the House Republicans and Democrats together try to elect a speaker. You've mentioned several of the maneuvers that the United States has made nearby in Israel. What is the American position right now in this conflict? I mean, we don't have boots on the ground. Where are we on this?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, we've lost 30 Americans killed so far, and they say, you know, between 15 and 20 are still missing. You know, and when we went after and killed Soleimani in the previous administration, they had killed one American. Well, now they've killed 30. So, you know, we're kind of into the game, and one of the reasons I do believe that we put those carrier strike groups where they're at is to tell Tehran, back off. If you're involved at all, especially with Hezbollah to the north, which has got thousands of missiles pointed south towards Israel, don't go there, because we've got missiles too, and ours have a longer and better reach with the TLAMs. And let Israel solve the problem they've got with Hamas in the south. And I think one of the reasons they haven't gone in yet is I really do believe they're trying to figure out this hostage situation. You know, when they've got this many people they're missing, well over 100, to include some Americans, and they're trying to figure out, okay, how do we try to get them back? And then if they go in, it's going to be a pretty intense and bloody conflict. They did this in 2014, Annie. In other words, the Israelis went into Gaza 2014. Were there for about a month. It's a pretty bloody fight. Anytime you go into a street fight, you basically go door to door, floor to floor. It's a pistol range. It's close-in fighting, and it really eats up the amount of troops that you have on the ground. And the Israelis have already had 300 soldiers killed. That's a significant number. They'll lose more there. You know, my preference, if I was king for a day, I'd stand back and let's hammer Gaza with artillery and airstrikes just to pulverize the area, and then force everybody to the south. Because if you send in troops, it's going to be it's potentially very, very horrific. We've had experiences like that in the American military. You know, and back in the Civil War, you know, Grant sent Sherman to the sea, and in the process he burned the city of Atlanta to the ground. In World War II, we destroyed Dresden. We recently U.S. military fought in Fallujah, places like that in Iraq. It's a tough fight. So they've got some big issues on their hand. I think, you know, the president's going to go there, and I'm hoping the biggest thing he can do is give Netanyahu some support, because we've lost those Americans, and tell the Iranians to back off. If you start something, we're going to finish it. We'll tell Supreme Leader Khomeini, don't do something dumb. We told them that when we killed Soleimani, and they didn't do something stupid. And we need to remind them that we have just the same military power today as we did then.
We're speaking with the co-chair of the Center for American Security at America First Policy Institute, retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg. I continue to hear about, these 100,000 missiles, and I'm not any military expert, don't pretend to be, which is why we are so grateful for your presence here today. But I'm also thinking to myself of a lot of the political back and forth that we hear stateside about whether or not we have funded our own military to be able to provide for Ukraine, which is where we've been sending a lot of resources, now potentially Israel, but also the idea that we do have 30 Americans dead in this conflict and the potential of what could happen tomorrow. My question, Lieutenant General, is are we prepared here in America, funded and resourced to be able to fight and win?
Well, I think we're having a little bit of a problem right now, and it cuts, honestly, and it cuts across multiple levels. One is the readiness of the force out there, and they're not as ready as they were 5 years ago, 6 years ago. For example, flying hours. Where flying hours, we used to average about 30 hours per pilot. Now we're down to about 10. The Army missed their recruiting goals. They missed it last year and this year. The Navy missed their recruiting goals. The Air Force missed their recruiting goals. Only the Marines and the Space Force made their recruiting goals. When it comes to things like ammunition, look, we took 300,000 rounds of the War Reserve stock ammunition. That's the term they use, War Reserve stock ammunition. 300,000 rounds, sent them to Ukraine for use, 155 rounds. And we had to bring those back because that's what the Israelis are using. And it's almost like, okay, we have to look at, and the next administration will have to look really hard at the defense industrial base. We have to look at the military. I really do believe, and this is a harsh assessment, I know, that we forgot the primary role of the military is to deter, and if deterrence fails, fight and win our nation's wars. And I think that's become not a secondary role; it's a tertiary role. And I think I'm very, very concerned about the fighting attitude that we've got. And now we're facing three major potential global events. You're looking at China, Taiwan, you look at Ukraine, Russia, and you look at the Middle East. And you're seeing a surge all these forces all the way around. And it's not an easy picture to see. Frankly, I'm a little bit concerned about it, and I think everybody should be concerned about it. If a major war breaks out, I think it could be in the Middle East, it could be in the Far East, and I'd really watch China right now because they may see us really wrapped pretty heavy in Ukraine, Russia / Middle East, and who knows what they're going to do.
We're speaking with retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg. You were the former National Security Advisor to the Trump administration, and you just mentioned they're the next administration. According to my calculations, we have 385 days until the next election, and then, of course, the time in between then and the inauguration of the next president. How much could happen between now and that moment in time, and how drastically could a new administration affect what is going on in the world and that American deterrence through strength?
Well, everything emanates from the commander-in-chief. Under the Constitution, Article 2, Section 2, he is the commander-in-chief, and it's the will. And I heard a senator make that comment today. You can have the greatest military in the world, but if you haven't got the political will to use it and the knowledge to use it, then it's actually useless sitting there. And I remind everybody, and this is obviously parochial, but I reminded everybody that, former Secretary of Defense Bob Gates, and also a former CIA director, said, Joe Biden was wrong on nearly every national security issue in the last 40 years. And he's kind of pushing the envelope. He delays and he does things behind instead of being in front. And the greatest example is look how long it took us to get ATACMS in the Ukrainians' hands. They still don't have fighter jets that they need there. It took us a while to get those carrier units in position. But is he willing to use them? Is he willing to pick up the phone and warn off Khomeini of Iran that if you do something stupid, we have over 600 Tomahawk land attack missiles that can touch you. Each one has a 1,000-pound warhead on it, and we can make life really uncomfortable for you. So back off. Has he made that message? Does he know that? Look, when they killed a single American, the Iranians, that's when we killed Soleimani. We also picked up the phone and called, or had people do it for us because we didn't have direct contact. We told Khomeini, the supreme leader, that you were next. And here's the telling point on that one, just very quickly, is 3 days after we told them that, and they'd fired back at Al-Assad Air Base, didn't kill anybody. But remember, the Iranians shot down a Ukrainian airliner leaving Tehran, and that was because they thought we were actually coming after Khomeini. And it was one of those one of the big mistakes. That's when you've got credibility, and that's when they understand you're serious about it. Has this president done that? He needs to pick up the phone. He needs to call them or call somebody, have somebody, the Swiss or even the Russians, tell him that. And that's the issue of will. Are you willing to make that hard call?
Last quick question for you. We're speaking with retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg. The President the message that I continue to hear him say is one word. It's don't. He said it to Scott Pelley multiple times. In my mind, when I hear and see Joe Biden say don't when it comes to whether or not missiles might be coming from a second or a third front in Israel, and he continues to repeat that word, don't. Don't, to me, sounds very different from a President Biden than it does from a President Trump because of the context, the unspoken things that go with that don't. Do you believe that Joe Biden's word there has the weight it needs to have to encourage them to truly don't?
No, because and it doesn't, Annie, because it all is based on your past record, what you've done. You know, when we defeated ISIS, the caliphate the size of Great Britain, when we killed Baghdadi, when we killed Soleimani, now people said, okay, they're serious. When we moved the embassy after Obama and Bush and Clinton didn't do it, we moved the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. People said, don't do it. We did it. And I think that's the will that the people have to see. So when you say as a president, don't go there, they believe you. Now, then I don't think they have a reason to believe them. And that's when you actually pick up the phone and you tell them, we're coming. And that's the Supreme Leader Khomeini understood that. And the reason why that's important in this fight is he really does control, the Iranians, control what Hezbollah does to the north. That is really an Iranian proxy, much more so than Hamas is. And they've got the missiles. And if you want to tell them, don't go there and help Israel out, just basically back off. And since they've killed 30 Americans, you can tell them, we're going to put one through your front door if you don't watch out, because we don't appreciate Americans being killed. And they have to believe that. And I don't think they do right now.
Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, thank you for your time and your expertise. These stories continue to grow in importance each day, and we're very grateful for your time to discuss them with us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Bye-bye. We hope to do it again. Former National Security Advisor to the Trump administration and the co-chair of the Center for American Security at America First Policy Institute, on Twitter, X, at General Kellogg, 2 L's, 2 G's.